Gene Kelly, Jack Cole, and Bob Fosse, arguably the three most influential jazz dance figures in American film history, each turned to her at pivotal moments in their careers. Welcome to Hey Dancer and another episode of my weekly series, The Rest of the Story. I'm your host, Miller DeRay, and today we're spotlighting one of the most influential and overlooked and underappreciated figures in dance history. Now, make sure you're subscribed or following so you never miss an episode, and because all the platforms love when you engage, like, comment, share, all the things, please do that because it really helps my dance podcast reach new people. And also, make sure you stick around through the end because while this show usually skips the gossip, today's story is so unique. It's tangled in myths, contradictions, and internet rumors. So, in the outro, I'll do my best to unpack what is real and what is not. All right, curtain up, let's begin. She was born in New Bedford, Massachusetts in 1924, the younger of two daughters. Her father was a bank teller. Her mother, Danish-born, had a softer heart and a belief in signs. One day, when her daughter was still a toddler, this mother visited a Portuguese fortune teller who read the cards and said, "Your younger girl will someday be top of the avenue." Well, that was enough. Her mother enrolled her in dance lessons that week. By 5, she was twirling through her childhood. By 15, she'd opened her own dance studio, teaching 125 students while still juggling high school. She performed at school functions, her Mexican hat dance a crowd favorite. But this wasn't just a teenage passion. She pulled sodas at the drugstore, danced at ladies' clubs, even worked in a golf ball factory, all to help pay for the dance school she built herself. Even then, she was pushing hard. Too hard, some would later say, but to her, dance wasn't something she did. It was who she was. She designed her own costumes, and it said her mother sewed them for her shows. She played piano. She had a distinct husky voice. Now, this was due to a severe throat infection when she was little. Every part of her life, school, work, art, revolved around movement. By the time she'd graduated high school in 1943, she'd been voted best dancer and most likely to succeed. She was in chorus on the prom committee and already known for doing too much, too well. The next step was inevitable. She moved to Hollywood and returned to familiar jobs, pulling sodas behind a counter, waiting tables, and picking up dance gigs wherever she could, including uncredited dance roles in films like Wonder Man and Ziegfeld Follies. By 1946, her persistence paid off. While dancing in nightclubs, she caught the attention of Jack Cole, the man often called the father of theatrical jazz. He made her his lead dancer and assistant. For the next 2 years, she toured with the Jack Cole Dancers, performing high-voltage routines full of isolations, angular shapes, and what one dancer called controlled wildness. Under Cole's famously grueling demands, she pushed herself harder than ever. The hours were long, the choreography relentless, the pace unforgiving, but she thrived in it. His style didn't just shape her technique, it toughened her, refined her, and forged the distinct movement language that would define her next chapter. She worked with Cole on stage and behind the scenes, helping teach his choreography to major stars, including Rita Hayworth. She was also part of his early work on film, appearing as a dancer uncredited in musicals like Down to Earth and The Thrill of Brazil. Not too long after, Gwen Verdon would famously follow in her footsteps. But this dancer laid the groundwork, step by isolating step. She wasn't just executing Cole's choreography, she was embodying it. And soon, MGM would take notice. In 1949, everything shifted. Just as Cole had discovered her in a nightclub, so did Gene Kelly. He went backstage and told her he wanted to work with her, not as a chorus dancer, but as his assistant choreographer. For the next 7 years, she was by his side. The hours were punishing, the expectations sky high, but she delivered, working closely with him on choreography for On the Town, Summer Stock, and American in Paris, Singin' in the Rain, Invitation to the Dance, and Brigadoon. But she didn't just stay behind the scenes, she also took on small dance roles of her own. Sometimes in Kelly's films, sometimes in others. She appeared uncredited in On the Town as the striking dancer in green, and danced in Tea for Two with Doris Day, where her crisp execution grounded the Charleston number. You'll also catch her in Summer Stock, blended into the chorus alongside Judy Garland. Still, studio heads concluded she didn't photograph well enough to be a star. It wasn't about her talent, it was about image. And so, instead of shrinking back, she doubled down behind the scenes. She became a lifeline to the work itself, running rehearsals, shaping performances, even cueing the lights. She rehearsed Leslie Caron for An American in Paris, and in Singin' in the Rain, she trained Sid Charisse for the now famous Broadway ballet number, a role that had originally been hers. She had already learned and rehearsed the entire routine. She shaped the movement. Then, just before filming, Kelly chose to cast Charisse instead. Our girl stayed on to coach her replacement, refining the very steps she had prepared to perform. It was a crushing turn, but instead of stepping back, she doubled down on the work, for which she was always grateful for. In An American in Paris, she even ran the light cues in the number Stairway to Paradise. She would synchronize the lighting with the beat of the music, and in Invitation to the Dance, Kelly's experimental dialogue-free ballet film, she belly danced, crouched, and spun for the animators, modeling 3 animated characters, the genie, the dragon, and Scheherazade. Her body became the movement reference that brought those fantastical figures to life. Kelly once called her precision fabulous, and his trust in her ran deep. Whether coaching stars, controlling the lights, or animating dance itself, she made his vision possible, frame by exacting frame. By 1953, her work was stepping into the spotlight. In Kiss Me Kate, she danced opposite Bob Fosse in the sizzling duet From This Moment On. It was just a few minutes of film, but it changed everything. Her crisp isolations, finger snaps, and grounded power, hallmarks of Jack Cole's influence, blended with Fosse's own sharp lines and syncopation to create something electric. Critics raved, audiences took notice, and so did choreographers. That number is now seen as the birthplace of Fosse's signature style, and she helped to shape it. As one writer put it, quote, "At that instant, the Bob Fosse style came into existence," end quote. Fosse may have been choreographing for the first time, but her presence was the catalyst. She didn't just match him, she made him better. The following year, Kiss Me Kate opened a new door. Her explosive duet with Fosse had turned heads, not just in the audience, but among Broadway producers. It helped land Fosse the choreographer job on The Pajama Game, and he made one request: bring her with him. Director George Abbott later recalled, quote, "According to Bob, that girl was Marilyn Monroe. He said she was gonna be a star," end quote. She was still assisting Gene Kelly on Brigadoon at the time, torn between her loyalty to MGM and this new opportunity. But she flew to New York to audition for The Pajama Game, and the offer came quickly. At MGM, she was working under Arthur Freed, head of the powerhouse Freed unit, behind the studio's golden era musicals. Freed granted her an early release from her contract so she could take the part, originally a small role named Poopsie. But once rehearsals began, her comic timing and bold movement changed everything. Abbott fired another actress and expanded her role into Gladys Hotchkiss. On opening night, she delivered. Steam heat stopped the show. Hernando's Hideaway lit it up again. In 1955, she won the Tony Award for Best Featured Actress in a Musical. When she reprised her stage role in the 1957 film adaptation of The Pajama Game, she radiated on screen. Her comic timing was razor sharp, her movement crisp, and her presence held its own next to Doris Day. Critics praised how effortlessly she translated her stage success to film. It felt like a star turn, the kind that launched careers. It would end up being her only major starring role on screen. The chance she'd waited for had arrived, but not without a cost. Behind the confident performance was a dancer battling rising stage fright and newly diagnosed diabetes. The spotlight she had worked so hard to earn had started to feel like a weight. Offers began to slow, but her artistry, that never did. This dancer's brilliance didn't end in front of the camera. As the film offers slowed, she shifted to choreography, bringing the same precision, wit, and fire to her behind-the-scenes work. In 1958, she reunited with Gene Kelly to choreograph Flower Drum Song on Broadway. Her numbers were energetic, unpredictable, and full of personality, earning her a Tony nomination. She continued choreographing for Broadway throughout the early 60s, bringing that same signature style to shows like Bravo Giovanni, 1962, She Loves Me, 1963, and Funny Girl, 1964. Each production bore her stamp, jazzy, dynamic, and infused with emotional detail. In total, she earned 3 Tony nominations for choreography. She brought the same rigor she'd learned from Cole and Kelly to everything she staged. She also made standout television appearances, singing, dancing, and choreographing on specials like The Perry Como Show and The Bob Hope Buick Hour and The Ed Sullivan Show. Every performance had her signature, crisp rhythms, clever details, and that unmistakable spark. Even as her health declined, her influence grew. Teachers borrowed her movement phrasing. Dancers studied her musicality. Numbers she performed, like Steam Heat and Hernando's Hideaway, are still broken down in class. And the shows she later choreographed, She Loves Me, Flower Drum Song, Funny Girl, left a lasting mark on Broadway's movement vocabulary. She shaped how jazz dance was stylized, staged, and passed down. Her name doesn't come up nearly enough, but when you see stylized stillness, a cheeky head roll, a snap that hits on the upbeat, you're seeing her legacy. Her name, Carol Haney. And now you know the rest of the story. All right, dance fam, before I get into the rumors behind arguably one of the most storied tales of a Hollywood superstar, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it with a fellow dancer or musical theater fan, anyone who should be educated on Carol Haney. Because, yeah, I want to get her story out there. So share, comment, like, all the engagement, and make sure you're following my podcast, Hey Dancer. All right, let's get back to Haney. Now, I almost never get into the personal lives of the dancers I cover. That's not what this show is about. But with Carol Haney, it feels important because the truth is, she gave everything to her work, and over time, it took a visible toll. As I had mentioned, she was diagnosed with diabetes. Some say she struggled with alcohol, though that part of her story is harder to confirm. There's a lot of rumors out there, and I'm telling you, it's very hard to vet every little thing, and I do my best. What we do know is that by the time Funny Girl opened on Broadway, she was exhausted. Just 6 weeks into the run, she died of pneumonia. She was only 39. Her final Tony nomination came posthumously. I'm not sharing this to dramatize her story in any way. I'm just sharing it because it reminds us how much she gave in such a short time and how fully she poured herself into her work. Haney's brilliance came at a cost. And actually, Gwen Verdon is quoted as saying after Ms. Haney passed away, quote, "She was like a great big husky puppy dog that never knows when it's tired. She was so enthusiastic about everything that she never noticed the strain. When people asked her to slow down, she'd just bubble on about some new project," end quote. Okay, now let's get to the biggest part of all when it comes to Carol Haney's story, the part that involves a superstar. So when people tell the story of how Shirley MacLaine became a star, they rarely mention the woman whose role she stepped into. I hesitated even telling this next part because in some ways it continues the pattern of keeping Haney in the shadows of someone else's rise. But the way this story has lived on, the way it's so often misunderstood, actually says a lot about how legacy works, and by the end, I think it becomes clear. The story that still floats around, the one people Google when they've heard the lore about Shirley MacLaine's big break, because if you dig into that story, it leads straight back to Carol Haney. In 1954, during the Pajama Game, Haney injured her ankle. Some say sprain, others say tear, some say break. Whatever it was, she was forced to sit out. Her understudy, a then unknown Shirley MacLaine, was rushed on stage. During the number Steam Heat, she famously dropped her hat and blurted, "Oh shit!" The audience ate it up. Standing ovation. The lore goes like this. Hollywood producer Hal Wallis just happened to be in the audience to see Haney that night, but instead saw MacLaine and signed her to a film deal on the spot. Haney was known for powering through pain, so even when she was injured, many assumed she'd be back fast. Some say she was out for a month. MacLaine, in her memoir, makes it sound like just one night. Either way, it was rare. MacLaine later said she never thought she'd get another chance, but then came another twist. Haney got laryngitis, and MacLaine was called up again. That night, or maybe the next day, depending on who's telling it, someone from Alfred Hitchcock's team was in the audience. They weren't expecting MacLaine, but they saw her, and The Trouble with Harry, a quirky mystery comedy about a dead body no one knows what to do with, became her first big film role. But here's where the whole fate stepped in story starts to unravel. Because I did a lot of digging. In Warren Beatty, A Private Man, a biography written by Suzanne Finstad, and yes, Warren is MacLaine's younger brother, it suggested that none of this was luck. MacLaine's fiancé, Steve Parker, had been orchestrating it all, giving away tickets, setting up meetings, rehearsing with her into the early morning. One Broadway friend said, quote, "Steve got all kinds of people to come see her. Who knows, but they were there," end quote. MacLaine herself has told the story many ways. In My Lucky Stars, her memoir, she remembers Hitchcock being in the house that night. In earlier interviews, though, probably much more aligned with the truth, she says it was his producer, not Hitchcock, Herbert Coleman, who came first. Some say he phoned Hitchcock at dinner. Others say he sent a telegram. One account claims he brought Hitchcock in person to a later show. Classic showbiz, part truth, part myth, part PR. And what about Hal Wallis, the first producer who apparently came to see Haney but saw MacLaine instead? Well, despite the myth, Hal Wallis was never in the audience to see Carol Haney. He came later, invited by Steve Parker, again, MacLaine's fiancé who knew MacLaine was going to be on, to watch MacLaine perform. He liked what he saw, offered her a screen test, and she signed a deal with him before filming The Trouble with Harry. So 2 movie breaks, both tied to Haney being out, both clouded in a mix of luck, ambition, and maybe a little orchestration. Now, most versions of the story make it sound like the stars aligned for MacLaine and such bad luck for Haney that all those Hollywood eyes were there for Haney and missed her by chance. But that's not what really happened. Hal Wallis and Hitchcock's team weren't in the audience for Haney. They never were. They were brought in deliberately to see MacLaine. And let's be clear, Haney did not fade. She went on to star in the Pajama Game film. She kept creating, and maybe, just maybe, the spotlight in front of the camera wasn't where she was meant to stay. I mean, her later battles with stage fright suggest she found her true voice in choreography. So, was Haney's injury the moment that made Shirley MacLaine? Maybe. But the deeper truth is this: Haney made the moment possible. Don't forget, that part was expanded for her when Abbott saw what she could do. So it was basically, in many ways, created around Haney. She was, for long stretches of time, a driving force behind dance giants, an essential part of the careers and trajectories of Jack Cole, Gene Kelly, and Bob Fosse. The dancer with the smoky voice, the guts, the stamina, the haircut MacLaine copied just to get in the room to be her understudy. Because no one steps into the spotlight without someone else building the stage first. And Carol Haney, she didn't just build stages, she built legacies. Until next time.